Parents, what weird or creepy stories do you have about your child's imaginary friend? My wife and I were sitting for our nephew. He kept coming downstairs because there was a monster under his bed. So, I marched upstairs, grabbed the monster from under the bed, dragged it downstairs, opened the door and threw it out into the night. Nephew burst into tears and was inconsolable because that was the nice monster and not the nasty monster. So 11 p.m. on a dark Saturday night, and I am crawling around a damn wet garden looking for an imaginary monster and trying to apologize so my nephew could go to sleep. Before I was born, my parents bought a Winnie the Pooh stuffed animal, and my mom always found it very cute. When my sister was a toddler, my mom would make my sister eat her food by saying, "If you don't eat it, Pooh will eat it, he's a good boy." So, one time when my sister was like 4 or something, I was around 6, we couldn't find Pooh anywhere. So, my mom and I searched the whole house, all the way from the master bedroom down to the basement. But we couldn't find him anywhere. Then for some reason, I said we should look outside. My mom says that he's a toy and can't walk out the door, but I insist. Sure enough, there he is, outside the door in the snow. My mom guesses that this may have been my sister. So, we go back to the living room, and there my sister is putting on that face she puts when she does something mischievous. Mr. Nobody. He started as the person the kids would blame if one of them forgot to flush the toilet. And then his mythology evolved. For the record, all of this was conceived by 3 of my kids, who at the time were 6, 5, and 3. Mr. Nobody has no eyes, no teeth, no tongue, and no nose. He doesn't wear pants and leaves the used toilet paper between his butt cheeks so you can tell where he is by his smell. He doesn't wear a shirt, but has a pocket cut into his skin where he keeps the key to our house. He can be invisible. He had a beard since he was a baby. He bites off his fingernails and then drips blood where he walks. A friend of mine drew him at the time. Thankfully, been a few years since Mr. Nobody has been in our house now. A few years ago, my niece kept telling her mom about her secret mommy, who lives in the corner of her bedroom, only comes out at night when no one but her is up and talks to her. The whole family was terrified until they figured out it was actually an old alarm clock in the room set to a talk radio station that went off at 3 a.m. every night. My daughter started saying Bob before she learned how to say mama or dada. She would say it all the time at random times. One time I was in the nursery rocking her to sleep when she said it, and so I asked, "Who's Bob?" She pointed up at the corner of the ceiling behind me. Part of how my anxiety manifests is through paranoid delusion, which made for an interesting go of figuring out what I was talking about as a kid. I would pour whole sodas and other drinks down the drain, and claim I was feeding the dragon who lived in the basement. This was imperative. Not a fun hobby. That giant lizard in the boiler room was going to engulf the building in hellfire if I didn't feed him. I was saving lives. I was about 10 or 11 years old when my parents figured out something was wrong with me and that I really believed there was a dragon in the basement of all of our homes. During childbirth, I had complications, I almost died, and my daughter actually did. They revived her, and we have been happy and healthy since. Since an infant, she always looked around like she watched something and just giggled at it. Fast forward to the age of 4, and she tells me about her first imaginary friend, Ghosty. All of her imaginary friends are ghosts. To this day, she still talks to them at the age of 7. Some of her stories just give me the spooks. Unsure if they are real or not, I am always sure to be kind to my daughter's ghost friends and invite them along with us. Out of my 4 kids, only my eldest son, now 20 years old, had an imaginary friend. Its name was Barcy, and it was a giant wolf but could transform into a boy. Anyway, my wife and I didn't think much about Barcy until we noticed that my son had broken a plastic butter knife and stabbed quite a few of his stuffed animals. He told us that Barcy had told him to do and had even helped. That was when we really got concerned. My son had anger issues as a child, and the reason for that is that, while I call him my son, he is my stepson. His biological father lost custody because of drug-related crimes and just abandoned him. So, my son has always thought of me as his dad but was still extremely angry about the situation with his biological. Anyway, we took him in to get some counseling after an incident involving a lighter that he found on the ground outside our apartment. He had tried to burn his baby brother's favorite toy. While in counseling, it came to light that Barcy was planning to eat our family and to pee our blood all over the apartment. This was the beginning of my son's counseling and mild medications. Barcy disappeared over a few months, and we were able to take my son off the medication the following year. He remained in counseling for quite a few years, but Barcy was never mentioned again. Not really an imaginary friend, but I had an imaginary family of alligators that lived under my bed when I was a kid. Oftentimes I'd get so scared I'd sleep in my brother's room because the daddy alligator wouldn't come out to scare me if I was with my brother. In the past, I have seen things out of the corner of my eye and glanced to see nothing there. Of course, that's just my eyes being weird, and I stopped paying attention to those things. Well, my daughter is just a toddler, and I had her sitting in my lap reading a book. I see something in the corner of my eye as usual, and my daughter quickly looks over there. She then stares wide-eyed at nothing and watches it cross through the room. This has happened 3 times. She's not at the point to where she can communicate what she is looking at, but we are pretty close. If it happens again, I'll ask her what she sees. Not really an imaginary friend, but something still creepy. I don't know if it counts, but I want to share. We briefly rented a townhouse while waiting to purchase a house. While living in this townhouse, I had always felt creeped out by my bedroom. It had a wall of windows on one side. Even as a grown woman, I felt uncomfortable being in the room after dark and felt like I was being watched by something in the room. I never mentioned it to my daughter. Fast forward to us living in our own house that we bought. My daughter starts having nightmares and is scared to be in her room. One night I asked her about the nightmares. She said it was a ghost who said that he followed us from the room with all the windows. Youngest daughter one time asked us to keep our bedroom door open because her imaginary friend couldn't open doors. We laughed it off that she was just afraid and wanted to see us or know we were home if she woke up in the middle of the night. The next day, I casually asked what her friend did at night, and she said she liked to stand at the end of our bed and watch us sleep. Creep alert number 1. We asked how often she speaks with her, and she said she really only likes to talk and come out at night. Creep alert number 2. We asked, can you draw a picture of her? She did. We asked what was up with her smile, and she said she had really sharp teeth and a lump on her head. Anyways, we eventually got a dog, and she told us her friend didn't like the dog because he stared at her at night. Long story short, we eventually moved. Her friend didn't come with us, but her daughter said she'd probably find us. That was 8 years ago. We haven't heard about her since we moved. We have moved one more time since. I'm hoping she is lost. Heard my 3-year-old son talking up a storm in his room, pausing as if he's listening to another person answer him. No one was with him, so I asked who he was talking to, and he said Grammy. She came for a visit. Grammy was my husband's grandmother who died in our house 3 years before our son was born. We figured she just wanted to spend some time with him. She stayed around for a couple months, then he never saw her again. My daughter was 4 and had 2 friends when we lived in a rental house. One was named Samantha. Samantha would insist on staying in my daughter's room most of the time. Then my daughter would say that Samantha has to go to bed, and we asked where her bed was. She very calmly told us, she leaves the house when it gets dark and goes out the back door and sleeps under the grass. So we opted not to investigate further. The other was a man that she called monstressed or something close to that. According to her, he was very nice and had long black hair and wore tan pants and funny shoes with no shirt. She said he was usually covered in blue and white and, according to the kid, would come, walk around the house and the yard, hang around and listen to music if we had some on, and would stand in the front yard until morning. We've since moved out of that house, and she has not uttered one thing about either friend visiting or anything. My now 17-year-old son chose Frank the Combine from Cars, you know, the one that chases McQueen and Mater after tractor tipping, as his imaginary friend. The creepy thing was just this year, my boy was describing a character he created for his latest D&D campaign, and I realized he was describing Frank. When I pointed it out, he laughed and said he hadn't noticed how similar they were. While I'm not a parent, I do have a story about my younger brother's imaginary friends. In order for any of this to make sense, I need to explain that my sibling would frequently draw inspiration from things that I had said or done, but not quite hit the mark with his own attempts. For example, after I had purchased a poster to hang above my bed, he took it upon himself to stick an inch-wide clothing patch, the sort that you might sew to a jacket, above his. This kind of thing was pretty common, and it extended into make-believe scenarios. Anyway, one day when I was in elementary school, I wrote a fairly uninspired story about Mario, Luigi, Toad, and Princess Toadstool making their way to my neighborhood from the Mushroom Kingdom. This was back before Toadstool had retaken her original name of Peach. The plot saw the characters ejecting themselves from a television, then having to contend with real-world physics and such. My class had loved the tale, so that night, I recited it to my brother, pretending as though I was describing events that had taken place that very day. The boy was utterly spellbound, and furthermore, he immediately started playing along. We traded whispered details for hours until long after we were supposed to have been asleep. Unfortunately, my brother's enthusiasm remained until the next morning, when he took it upon himself to recount our adventures to our mother. The people from Mario came out of the television. He excitedly told her. I had to tell them how to use knives because their fireballs didn't work. Somewhat absent-mindedly, our mother replied with, "It sounds like a fun dream." No, it wasn't a dream. My brother angrily insisted. I was awake. I couldn't sleep because they got in bed with me. That's why I had to get knives from the kitchen. That got our mother's attention. An interrogation quickly followed, during which it was, eventually, established that none of the household's cooking implements had actually been stolen during the night. The question of why mustache-sporting men, even imaginary ones, had been allowed to climb beneath my brother's covers was also raised, then followed by a somewhat graphic lecture about never letting strangers into the house, let alone one's bedroom. Suffice it to say that I was never able to look at Mario in quite the same light. My stepbrother had an imaginary friend named Willa Rose. One night, my mom found the dog dead outside. My stepbrother admitted to killing the dog because Willa Rose told him to do it. The next day he disappeared. Mom told me he went to go live with grandma for a while. I am 21 now, and I haven't seen him since. My stepbrother told me what Willa Rose looked like before he got sent away. Apparently, she was a 14-year-old girl who died in 1904. She has no eyes but wears glasses, paper white skin, and wears a ruffled pink dress with olive green stockings. Apparently she came from the sky. My stepbrother believed that once a person dies, they enter the sky. Then, they can come back as ghosts and become people's imaginary friends. Pretty creepy, but that was my 2 cents. So, my 3-year-old started talking about her friend Arlo, telling us stuff she did that was funny. We assumed she was talking about a friend of hers from school and made up stories about them playing together. Nothing alarming or weird, pretty much how she talked about the other little kids in her Head Start class. We came to find out that, in fact, that is no Arlo in her school. Still, maybe she's just being lazy pronouncing a name or something. When we asked her about it, she pretty much said Arlo doesn't go to school. So that was weird, but we figured, whatever, she just had an active imagination. It got hot outside around this time, and we live a couple houses down the street from the local beach. A new ice cream guy started hitting the beach religiously, like 6 times a day. I get it, that's obviously a guaranteed couple of sales every time he swings through. Our daughter really liked the music and wanted to know why he played music, and obviously not wanting to have to listen to her beg for ice cream 6 times a day all summer long, we told her that he's just the music man and he comes by to play music. This was right when the lockdown was in full effect in our area, and other than going to the lake, there wasn't much to do. Her school stopped, and we honestly didn't go outside beyond our yard or the grocery store and work for most of the summer. So, she hasn't hung out with many kids in the past couple of weeks. Anyway, one day she hears the ice cream guy come to the park, and all excitedly tells me that, that's not a music man. He's an ice cream man, and he sells ice cream. Arlo told me that you lied and said he was a music man's dad. So, that was kind of creepy. We asked where Arlo lives, and she told us she lives in her closet. And that was the last time I ever asked for more information about Arlo.